Kinesiology 223, Chapter 12. This is presentation number 3. We're still talking psychological skills training, also known as PST. All right, so this will be specific to myths about psychological skills training, knowledge base, and just drawing on experience as a coach or a practitioner. Let's jump in. So some of the myths that you have, and the book lists several. It's for athletes only, it's for elite training only, and it offers only quick fix solutions. And really, it's not the case. It's not for problem athletes. It's actually, for people who, when you look at the human form, they're trying to operate at and function at an optimal level. And it need not be for your problem athletes or the ones who are having challenges and can't get their headspace right. It's actually for those who perhaps want to, and it infers that they're not right, but that want to get to the next level, who want to do better. Perhaps there's an area of opportunity in there for your athletes to be able to really wrap themselves around themselves and understand who they are a little bit better. But the context that somebody has a behavioral issue and they need to do psychological skills training is just not it. What you're really trying to do is bridge a gap between the mental, psychological, and emotional side of the house with the physiological side of the house. For elite training only, that's just not the case. I mean, you can find ways to integrate this in with your clients in a health club setting or your athletes, at the junior high level. It just depends upon the situation, time, and place, and quite frankly, the population that's in front of you and what you're trying to accomplish. With the quick fix, I think I alluded to it in the last presentation. You're better off doing small drip campaigns, doing a little bit at a time instead of having a 2-hour presentation on psychological skills training with your people and then nothing. You're better off having this kind of slow and steady drip to help your athletes just kind of work through processes. And, it becomes a refinement process as opposed to being an all or none proposition. So, you're kind of, you're as a coach, you're required to have an understanding of what makes your athletes tick. And then to that end, when you see your athletes are not operating or functioning optimally in a practice or game environment, you may have to intervene at that moment to be able to get them on track. So 2 main resources, and you have original research that's done, say in a clinical setting, and you'll see research studies on this. I've alluded to Google Scholar a couple times. I urge you to take a look. And then you'll have the experience of coaches, and that's a pretty robust little nugget of information there. And I will say it's very robust, but the thing is, it's very specific to the person, and it's very much dictated by that person's background and experience. And really, much like we saw in the coaching presentations we had in the last module, it's actually a combination of both. If you can use robust research with coaching experience, it's kind of like you have the ball of knowledge and you have the wisdom to use it. I mean, there's a lot to be said for that, right? In terms of having the ability to know when to utilize knowledge. So the research on this, shows when you have athletes who have been exposed to psychological skills training, PST, those athletes will have higher confidence, greater self-regulation of arousal, better concentration and focus. They're in control. They're not forcing more positive thoughts and more positive imagery. And there's more determination and more commitment to the process as well as the outcome. But I can't stress this enough. You're definitely talking about a process here, and it's a process-oriented mindset as opposed to an outcome-oriented mindset. And what I found interesting was this last little part down here was, successful athletes also achieve peak performance by using mental skills of goal setting, imagery, arousal control, and management. These are the things that are all listed here to the left. But you look at this now in a paragraph, and it's not like a checklist of things. It's very much like a word cloud, if you will, of things that all work together to make performance happen or better performance happen. So it's not like, okay, I need higher confidence, check. I'll have greater self-regulation of arousal, check. No, it's more about having all these different components kind of all working together to facilitate a much bigger process. Now, with the coaching environment, experience seems to equate to greater use of mental training and preparing to do so. And I think, you might have like a younger coach who's not as progressive or maybe doesn't understand the value proposition here. But you look at this in terms of, I think maybe a younger coach versus an older coach. An older coach knows how and where to allocate their time in a practice environment and where they're going to get the best value for their buck, if you will, bang for their buck. And when the book lists these studies, they talk about how, like, in one such example, you have athletes who performed up to potential, which I would first question, what is potential? Can we please define that? But they don't here. It revealed that these athletes had developed plans for competition, plans for performance evaluation, and they had a performance evaluation in place. And then they had implemented in a plan for dealing with disruptions in the game environment, and they were practicing this in the practice environment. And I can give you an example. Like, I remember walking in one of the buildings I was working in at Austin Peay. It was a basketball stadium. And up in the very top section, in the very, very top, they had a big cardboard cutout of somebody, of a human form, just standing there. And they did that so the basketball players would presume somebody was watching them. It was kind of quirky. But I remember I was walking through there at night and I didn't know this thing was up there. And I looked up and I was like, said, "Hey, how's it going?" And it didn't reply to me because it was cardboard. And it was something where it kind of wigged me out a little bit. But when I went up later the next day when it was daytime and I checked it out, what they were doing was they were putting up in the press boxes, and they were putting these little cardboard cutouts of people as a distraction to the athletes. So when they were in the practice environment, they might see that up there out of the corner of their eye, but they could stay focused on what they were doing on the basketball court. I thought it was a really interesting way just to introduce in a disruption to those athletes, and just in a real subtle kind of way. Now, the other study they show here is that, or the other comment they make here regarding the study, is that the Olympians who achieve peak performance, again, not defined here in terms of peak performance, but they demonstrated a total commitment to pursuing excellence by setting daily training goals, using simulations in practice to replicate competitive environments, and employing imagery to help focus attention, visualization, and visualize successful outcomes. And I will point out the key word I think in this whole thing is pursuing, in terms of pursuing excellence. They weren't focused on the end result, and yet here they are. They achieved this peak performance, though it's not really well defined. But I will tell you, you look at this, you try to teach skills in a practice environment, and those skills sometimes include replicating performance that will be at or beyond the level they would expect in a game environment, employing imagery to help them visualize success and understand what success can be. It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. You kind of visualize yourself in that place. It becomes almost like a self-actualized goal. You start seeing yourself in a failure mindset. You start missing free throws or three-pointers. So, nobody goes into a game thinking they're going to lose. Everybody wants to win, and you have to have that mindset no matter what. And it's a matter of just visualizing those successful outcomes to be able to really own those and also have your body start to process that as such. Within psychological skills training, they have a pretty long little paragraph here, and I'll try to synthesize as best as possible. A coach can also use mental imagery and positive self-talk. The preparation will center around different scenarios. They can include any things like the athlete controlling their emotions, their decision-making, pre and post-game talks, self-talk when evaluating decision-making. So what I like about this is they're looking at this from the perspective of the coach, and the coach can even have use of mental imagery and positive self-talk. The coach can integrate in preparation that will center around different scenarios. So when they're coaching their athletes in a practice environment, they can put their decision making to the test and their emotional IQ to the test in the practice environment. And you can delegate, like, for example, we did this with football. We delegated out to a coach where our younger players, they would run a play and they would just be done with it. But what we did is we had a coach go out and just stand 10 yards out. And when the athletes broke the huddle, the coach shouted, hand up in the air. He was 10 yards out. first and 10, first down, 10 yards to go. And those athletes would run a play. And if they got 2 yards, it would be second down, 8 yards to go, and basically put a constraint into the system to force the athletes to make a decision. And this evolved to where we had our coaches who started to work on their own decision-making trees based upon if the athletes, the running back ran to the right side or the ball ended up on the left side of the hash. If it was 2nd and 3 or 2nd and 8, it changed the decision-making process for the coaches as well. So it became this very fluid kind of exercise in terms of many of our younger underexposed coaches had the opportunity to exercise their decision-making process in the context of a practice environment, so it helped them flow better in a game. And you can implement that into any sport, to be quite honest. So I have to ask, right, and I've said it 1,000 times, what does PST stand for? Partial selective training, physiological skills training, or psychological selective transference. Well, if you've been listening, it's going to be one of these. It's either psychological or physiological. And it's psychological skills training. I bring that up because in the book it reads as PST, PST, PST all the way through the book, and you lose track of what the heck PST is. So the 6 mental qualities the book lists here, you have resilience, imagery, concentration, mindfulness, relaxation, goal setting. You have to be, even though you're in a heightened arousal state when you participate in a sport, you still have to have a sense of relaxation. When you're working with your athletes and you're talking with them and perhaps you're doing some type of like mind-body connection exercise that's not in the practice environment, they might be fully relaxed. They might have very heightened mindfulness. And then you can talk with them more about goal setting, imagery, and resilience. But you have to be able to carry that nugget of information from a conversational tone to a practice environment and then to the game environment. And it becomes a case where as you do this correctly, you can kind of work in some of the resilience, some of the imagery, the concentration as separate little components. And you can work, Johnny, get up off the floor, go get that ball, get transition back on defense. That becomes even though he missed a shot and maybe it was fouled and didn't get the call, he needs to be resilient enough to get up off the floor and get back down and get on defense. You have different things in terms of concentration, mindfulness, relaxation, things that you can integrate in, and then you can integrate them all in a much bigger picture, maybe in a team meeting. But you can find ways to integrate those things in one-on-one while you're coaching your athletes. I'm going to break off from here and move on to the presentation.